You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor, subscribe to the channel, leave your comments below, and be sure to smash that like button. So there are sort of benchmarks throughout a season and an off season as you put together a roster for the following year, right? You've got your December signing period, you've got a transfer portal window, you've got your February signing period, you've got your spring portal window as well, and so on, as we know. Well, today is one of those sort of benchmark days where you can step back and assess what is left, because you'll be able to look at your roster and know who will and won't be returning as of this point. So today, the 15th, is the deadline for players to declare for the NFL draft. So we have a comprehensive list now of the guys from the LSU football team in 2023 who still have remaining eligibility that have made their decision if they're going to stay or go. And what I really want to focus on, not so much are the guys that are leaving, but the guys that are staying. So the guys that are leaving, we know a lot of them, and they're high profile, and it's a no-brainer. Like Jaden Daniels is on everybody's mock draft. He is now basically a consensus top 10 pick in everybody's mock draft. I mean, I could see a scenario where he goes and absolutely crushes the pre-draft workouts and interviews and ends up as the number one overall pick. Well, maybe that's not likely. It is plausible. So Jaden Daniels, Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas, guys we expected to go. Charles Turner is a guy who could have returned for his sixth season, ultimately decided to forego that year and go off to the NFL draft. Noah Cain declared last week, a guy who's battled injuries throughout his career, so he'll call it a career and go take his shot at the NFL. And then the two that were really disappointing that I think LSU really felt like they had a shot to keep, but we got the news last week with Mekhi Wingo and Mason Smith both declaring for the draft as well. Wingo right after the bowl game, and then Mason Smith, of course, early last week. So in all, those are 7 underclassmen. Oddly, Jordan Jefferson and Andre Sam each released statements on social media announcing they were going pro, but both of those guys are out of eligibility. So I don't know why. Maybe they just wanted to have their Twitter moment, which is fine. But it's seven players that had eligibility remaining. Daniels, Neighbors, Thomas, Turner, Cain, Wingo, Smith, those 7. So, and I'm not trying to minimize the importance, especially of the offensive guys. I mean, Jaden Daniels won the Heisman Trophy. Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas were the best receiving duo in college football this year. Both are going to be first-round draft picks. Charles Turner was a guy who showed up from IMG Academy weighing about 220 and built his body into being an SEC caliber, now NFL caliber center, and you wish him all the luck as he goes off to the Senior Bowl. But I think sometimes we focus so much on the players that leave, we don't focus enough on the players that made the decision to stay and what their impact might be. So I want to run through a handful of guys that stayed and why I think it's significant that they made the decision to do so. And I'm going to start with 2 guys on the offensive line. Now, I was told early in this process, and we did share it with you, that Garrett Dellinger and Miles Frazier were going to return to LSU. And true to form, they did. So Garrett Dellinger has been playing since his true freshman season at LSU. He will be a true senior next year, and he's returning. In his 3 seasons, Garrett Dellinger has played in 34 games with 23 starts. And he has played on both sides of the line. Garrett Dellinger even as a start at left tackle in his career. Miles Frazier, remember, transferred in from FIU, just finished his 2nd season in Baton Rouge and will now be returning for a 3rd season in Baton Rouge and a 5th season of college football. Miles Frazier has played in 41 career games with 37 starts. So understand the significance here. With Frazier and Dellinger both making the decision to return, Emory Jones and Will Campbell back for their junior seasons, you're replacing Charles Turner. You have 4 of your 5 starting offensive linemen back. Yes, you have to replace your center, but you really feel good about the development there at that position. So I think considering you're going to have a new offensive coordinator, which it looks more and more like that Brian Kelly is going to essentially just stay with what they did in the bowl game and promote Joe Sloan and Cortez Hankton as a co-OC, as co-OCs with Sloan calling the plays. It's not determined, obviously, and Brian Kelly hasn't made that announcement, but it certainly seems most likely that's what they're going to do. You're going to have a new center. DJ Chester is most likely to take over for Charles Turner there. And obviously a new quarterback with Garrett Nussmeier. And when you have a new OC, a new quarterback, you're replacing 2 All-America caliber receivers and your starting center. When you return 4 of your 5 starting offensive linemen, that is just such a huge basis, a huge cornerstone for this team. And then you look out wide as well, and you look at Kyron Lacy. Now, LSU has gone in the transfer portal and added 2 wide receivers. And Xavion Thomas, I think there's a lot of reason to be excited about a kid from Louisiana who went to Mississippi State, has had a productive career, and now is coming home. And then C.J. Daniels committed over the weekend from Liberty. We'll talk more about him. But Kyron Lacy is a guy now who is returning for a 5th season of college football, his 3rd year in Baton Rouge. After going to ULL for a couple of seasons, now 3 years in Baton Rouge. Lacy certainly could have chosen to go pro. And somebody would have drafted him because he's going to go to he would have gone to the combine and he would have run really fast and jumped really high, and he's got some good film. But he has the opportunity to come back and be a true number 1 receiver and prove that he can do that. And if he does that and has the type of season, say, that Brian Thomas had this past year, which he's certainly capable of, or like a Terrace Marshall after he was overshadowed by Jefferson and Chase and then finally got his opportunity. Now, he ended up opting out in the COVID year, but played part of that season and played really well when he did. You can understand the benefit of having a guy like Kyron Lacy back because Kyron Lacy, if you take out the 2 transfers, Kyron Lacy has more production than all of your other receivers combined in their careers. So, yes, getting Kyron Lacy back and complementing him with those transfers is big. And on the defensive side, I'll point out 2 guys, Savion Jones and Paris Shand. And honestly, I should throw Jacoby and Guillory in there as well. I don't want to be negligent. Let me make sure that I include Guillory because I do think Jacoby in returning is massive as well. So I'll start there with Guillory because in losing Smith and Wingo and Jordan Jefferson being out of eligibility, your top 3 interior players are gone. The fact that you got Guillory back, while I don't know that anyone's expecting Guillory to play at an All-America level, he's a rotational piece and a veteran body and a big body that, is from Alexandria. He went to Ash and is coming back to run it back one more time. And you've got Guillory, and then you've got Jalen Lee and some other guys that, with some new guys coming in. But Jacoby and Guillory returning is big. I'm not to say that he would have had a huge draft opportunity, but a lot of guys don't want to play 5 years of college football, and that's understandable if you want to go start your NFL clock ticking. So Guillory returning, I think, is big. And then Savion Jones and Paris Shand. Look, Jones is a guy who I'm going to be really interested to see what he does in Blake Baker's defense. This past offseason, every year when we go out to the first day of fall camp, it's always interesting to look and say, okay, well, who sort of remade themselves? Who made over their body? And it was so obvious that the answer this year was Savion Jones. I mean, he very clearly added good weight and became a monster to be able to be a run-stopping, edge-setting end in a 3-4. And that's not to say, look, and typically 3-4 ends, the big end as it were, they typically don't stuff the stat sheet, but they do a lot of dirty work. So you get Savion Jones back. That's so big on a defensive line where, as we mentioned, you lost your biggest and most productive players, and Jones is big enough to where he could probably be a little bit of a hybrid and play kind of inside out for you. And the same goes for Paris Shand. And I remember talking about this last week with Pete Jenkins. And Pete worked with his team, and one of the things that he said to me is, I don't know where we would have been as a defensive line without Jordan Jefferson and Paris Shand. Jefferson was very clearly your best guy, but Shand's versatility was often unsung. He did not start. Paris Shand did not start for you this year. And in his career, he's played in 37 games, with 10 starts. Those were all at Arizona. He did not start this year at LSU, any games. But he's coming back now for a 5th season in college football, and that is a guy who was versatile enough this year to play inside and out. And he finished the season with 18 tackles. He had 5 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks. Parashand was a guy that gave you, 5 tackles for loss, 2 sacks. He was a guy that gave you some versatility inside and out. And whenever you're rebuilding a position group, and I've labeled LSU's defensive line as a must, right? If you have wants and needs and musts, adding a receiver was a want. I think, linebacker and corner are probably needs. Interior defensive line is a must. But the only reason it's not like, a 4-alarm fire is because you're returning guys like Guillory and Shand and Savion Jones who have played a ton of football. Savion Jones has played in 38 games with 16 starts. Parashand has played in 37 games with 10 starts. So at least you have a cornerstone, which you would love over this portal period or after spring to have a starting caliber player on your defensive line. But the only reason that you're not completely gutted is because these guys who could have left made the decision to return for another year and give it a go under new defensive coordinator Blake Baker. So yes, we're going to focus a lot on what LSU lost, and you should, because they lost a lot of significant pieces. But I think it also is worth mentioning and underscoring the guys that are returning, because they will be cornerstones of what LSU is going to be in 2024. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.